He was plagued with visions of the dead, those he had failed to save, those he was failing to save. Leontius tossed and turned in his crib, sweat beading his brow, disturbed images playing across his features in a collection of grimaces, groans, and whimpers. He struggled to rise from slumber, to escape the hellish nightmares for just one more night. He had spoken to his superior about this, mental anguish, but the advice had been the same each time. Trust in the Emperor. His will guides you and will protect you. All terms he had heard previously at different times. All just words. His faith had not been strong as of late. Still, the dreams plagued his mind once more.
No, stop. I can't.
You left us to die?
No, it was not like that.
He tossed and turned, hands gripping the tools of his trade as he imagined trying to save his friend who lay on the slab in his mindscape.
We counted on you to aid us in our hour of need, and you failed.
We were being pulled back from the front line. The enemy.
He tried to justify his actions that day. Images flooded his synapses. A faltering defensive line. A guardsman with a fractured skull from an errant artillery blast on his medical slab. Cries of the injured and near dead. Superiors calling out for immediate reinforcement. The sounds of single las shots putting an end to the ones for aid, a necessary mercy, he reassured himself. Hordes of corpses surrounded his dream self. He pleaded for mercy.
I beg you,
he cried out.
I beg you, please understand. It was triage. We could not move you from that position. It was either stay and let the enemy kill you and us, or leave and put an end to your pain.
This pain.
The voices roared with wrathful hate and venom. He held his hands out in supplication to the ghouls that surrounded him. They encroached on his kneeling form, hands mottled grey and green, bony fingers grasping for his delicate skin, trying to grab a pound of flesh they demanded in exchange for his mercy. They went to work on his body. Lumps of red flesh pierced and stripped from limbs, arms held with unusually strong grasps as other tore at his form. The pain was exquisite. Each lingering pull of skin from muscle, a lightning bolt of agony. Tendon stretched and finally tore from bones, leaving him incapable of resistance, as if it was any use.
No!
He yelped through cries of anguish, as one of the female forms, a sergeant from her bloody fatigue she was garbed in, pulled his jaw open and viciously shoved her hands into his mouth, gripping his tongue with bloody tendrils that once were finely manicured fingers. As his tongue was pulled harshly, he felt blood pool in the base of his jaw. A few drops, then more, as the flesh gave way to force. A tear began ripping along the base of his tongue, before the muscle came away with a sudden release that he felt deep inside his marrow. It was beyond pain now. His vocal cords began vibrating with the sudden exhalation bubbling through a blood-filled maw.
Scream for us now.
He struggled to voice the abject horror filling his very soul through the blood-slicked opening of his lips as finally 2 sets of hands gripped his neck and pulled hard on his jaw, forcing it open savagely. Bones in his neck clicked, vertebrae audibly protesting at the abuse they suffered. Finally, at the last, he felt it. The extrication of head from neck. A fountain of gore erupted from eviscerated blood vessels. His last image from failing sight and sounds in his dying hearing as he witnessed the consuming of his decapitated corpse. Chattering teeth chewing fatty deposits in his stomach, the blood pooling in runnels at shuffling feet, and the baying laughter of a god thirsting for more.
Ah!
He awoke, tears running down his face. Sweat drenched his uniform as he arose from the nightmare. He checked his body for signs of the abuse he believed he had suffered. He felt nothing. He checked himself against the polished steel-pressed mirror on the barrack wall. No obvious sign of damage to his skin, apart from multiple scars earned during a career of hard fighting. He put on his off-white overalls, adjusting his ID tag and shoes before making his way to the temporary Medicaid facility. How many tonight? He entered the facility proper after a short walk. walls of monitors, identity cards, and tools in autoclave being readied for the work to come. He inquired with the orderly on duty as the junior medical adept filled in patients' details. Sounds of groans and pained yelps broke the din of distant gunfire from the front lines over 10 kilometers away.
27, sir.
The orderly sorrowfully replied. So few would survive their wounds tonight. Many would die. He would have to harden his resolve to deal with them. He put his hand on his assistant's shoulder, carefully reassuring the aide.
Let's be at it then,
he said, before attending his first patient. 27 bodies lay on slabs in the makeshift mortuary, a cold room once used to store several ranks of meat on steel hooks. This building has once been used to process animals, gene-bred to feed the populace, he mused. Now it was a cadaver store, a frigidarium for the dead. He considered the toe tag on the cold burned toe in front of him, another guardsman he had not managed to save. How could he be expected to save so many with such limited personnel? He required at least a dozen to administer effective treatment. He had been granted 2.
Damn the hierarchy,
he scoffed. He would request a transfer, he thought, away off this rock, a way to do some good rather than dealing with the loss of mankind. His faith in he on the throne wavered. He finished reading the name on the tag. Dawson was the surname. Why did it seem familiar? He looked at the next frozen corpse in line. This one was missing half its face. The toe tag read Mendelssohn. He said the name out loud, breath condensing as it left his mouth. He recognized the name again. A sudden sense of dread filled him. He knew the names because he had dealt with these patients before.
There is no way.
A bloody chuckle was barely audible across the large room. It emanated from one of the large steel containers used to store long-term bodies before incineration.
You left us to die, Leontius.
No, not again. Wake up, you're dreaming again.
He slapped his skin. It felt cold to the touch. Unusually cold. Another cackle, female this time, and the sound of wet footsteps on marble slabs. He looked for the source of the sound, but found nothing except still bags of bodies. Then a hand stroked his leg. An audible gasp bubbled into his throat, but he could not scream. It was held back by an unspoken fear, an impossible dread. The hand was limp, grey with cold and death. He took a deep breath in and made for the door. It threatened to freeze in his throat, instantly drawing pain deep inside. Another slap of wet skin on steel as another footstep was heard. Closer this time, he was sure of it. He could not see for the wisps of fog in the close confines. He tried for the exit handle. It was seized shut, likely cold-locked. He suddenly felt every degree of cold deep in his marrow. It gripped him like a vice. His ribs held rigid in his chest, intercostal muscles struggling to expel the supercooled air. He was rigid, feeling frozen in time. Was it fear stilling him, or hands holding him down? Dread gripped him tightly. The cold gnawed at his fibrous muscles, quivering with febrile effort.
It's not real. It's not real. It's not real.
He tried to reassure himself. Panic set in hard, forcing his hands to try their hardest to open the door. His limbs refused to respond to his motor commands.
You left us to die.
The disembodied echo rung in his ears. He knew the words. He recounted them syllable for syllable.
No, 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 no.
His mouth tried to form the words as hands finally responded to cognitive demand. Panic set in as he scratched at the metal. Nails began to peel back, cracking like splints in a storm. Cold burns began forming on his features. The temperature had begun to drop to near fatal levels. He had moments to escape the ultra-cold systems that had activated. Bodies became frozen solid, then brittle like glass at such ranges. Deep inside, he knew it was too late. He denied the nihilistic thoughts. The nightmare pushed back. He imagined ghouls approach him, grasping with cold-burned hands and bony digits under unnatural control. His mind, delirious with oxygen deprivation as his blood began to freeze, reached for the tangible, failing in the effort.
Help! Help! Help!
He felt his tongue freeze in the effort of speaking as the temperature continued to fall. Muscles froze, then became as hard as granite, robbing him of motor control. He tried to move away from the door, managing a single, agonizing step as the cadaver whose arm he brushed against shattered into crystals of frozen ruby droplets. He tried to move his left arm, feeling tendons pull tight at frigid muscles, tearing under the elastic load. Muscles gave way in his thighs, snapping back, driving him to his knees. Hands, desperate to maintain a grasp on life, reached for a body whose grey plastic sheet had fallen away. This one was subject to flesh-wasting disease. Bony fingers withered and ice-white skin sloughed off in the triple-digit cold. He imagined he could hear the accusations of the dead. He tried once more to justify himself to the dead. They did not reply. The body in front of him, pupils white and without feeling or warmth of life, peered through him. He was transfixed by the marble-like orbs.
"I beg you, stop this. Cease the pain,"
he begged, without voice to form. He may not be able to move fully, but pain awashed him in a tsunami of sensation. Breathing was near impossible, as his muscles threatened to break bone under the effort. Intercostal muscular contraction broke ribs, adding to the building crescendo of harrowing torment.
"This pain,"
he thought he heard them call out. His body was fit to bursting with agony now. Torment, a close and intimate lover in the last. He would die in this cell, a prisoner of his own fate. Ironic, he mused, as he tried to talk once more. All he felt and tasted was blood. It erupted from his tongue, tearing at the base of the muscle. He tried to swallow, but the effort tore at the muscle even more. As he leant forward to expel a mouthful of blood, his tongue sloughed out, landing on the steel floor, solidifying almost instantly. It fell from his mouth like a blood-stained serpent, shattering as it hit the deck. A pained moan erupted instead from his ravaged frame, the last breaths of a dying man. Feeling the impossible breath of the dead at his neck, he found he was kneeling next to a cadaver with eyes closed, but mouth painfully wide. He wanted dearly for those empty, soulless eyes to stay shut, willing for this dream to cease. It was no dream, he knew it. This was payment for a role. No ritual burning, offering up to the enemy, or even a lasbeam to the temple. His fate would be much worse. As he turned to face the head, he felt his neck vertebrae click in protest. Death was a close companion now, almost at one with him. However, this eldritch horror was not done with him. One last trick lay up its sleeve. One final horror. The eyelids flickered open on the corpse he was so close to he could kiss it. He willed it to stay dead. The eyes opened fully, milk-white orbs glaring with soulless hate and wrath. It sapped away his last vestige of sanity. He witnessed the mouth move by itself, ignoring the laws of reality.
"Scream for us now."
As he attempted to scramble away, muscles pulled and tore from bone. Ligaments yanked from bone connections, while smaller bones fractured and were broken. His feet gave way under flash-frozen muscles that refused to yield. His hips twisted, and his body fell like a rotten tree in the desolate wilderness. As his chest hit the frigid deck, his head fully ripped from the frozen stump of a neck, rolling away. His eyes were filled with the insane remnants of life. Frozen retinas witnessed the impossible. Body seemed to move, but was merely his point of view shifting. His lifeless body continued to twitch from uncontrolled nerve impulses firing, pulling itself apart, until the squelch of tearing muscle filled his ears. It sounded like flesh being torn apart by cadaverous hands. He tried to call out, but had no breath left. He tried to mouth a scream, but his jaw was locked in frozen rigor. His last ounce of life, as blood glistened like rubies, accepted his fate. He knew he was dead, and prayed to the God Emperor for his soul.
"You forsake him. He now forsakes you."
As a voice from beyond mocked his faith. It spoke with 1,000 falling blades, rasping across a din of eternal warfare. Blood flowed like an ocean, while the last part of what made him human, his soul, was consumed by one of the primordial four. His mind abandoned reason. His faith abandoned his savior. Now, salvation abandoned him for damnation. And in the cold confines of that isolated freezer, the distant sounds of laughter could be heard, if any soul lived to give it witness.